This video is going to show you how to store values so that you can check your answers in the equation in your calculator. So we have an equation, 2 to the x power minus 4 is equal to 28. We want to solve for x. So we don't know how to solve for this problem because it requires the inverse of an exponential. So if you have multiple choice and you have a calculator, you can use your answer choices and plug them in. Now, this one would be simple to just plug in 2 raised to each of these numbers, but what I want to do is show you how to store each of these so that we can type this in one time so we can hopefully save some time. This is very useful for equations that are much more complicated, that have a lot of fractions and a lot of variables and a lot of parentheses. So it's just a quick showcase of how to do this. So what I want to do is I want to take my first answer choice and I want to store it in my calculator for the variable x. So what I do is I take my 1/5, so I'm going to do 1 divided by 5. This is one way of writing 1/5. And I want to store it. So this STO arrow is telling me to store it. So if I press store, I get an arrow. And I want to store this number in for x. So I have to press 1/5 and then it goes into x. I press enter. Now every time I press the variable x on the home screen, it gives me the same value of 0.2. So the reason I do this is now I can type in 2 raised to the x power, not 1/5. I don't have to worry about fractions in my exponent. I can make it look exactly like this. And then I press the right arrow key, I put minus 4. Now I want it to equal 28, so if my answer is 28, I have my correct answer. So I press enter. That is not 28. So that means that 1/5 does not work. So now instead of having to rewrite all of this, I can now store 1/4 in for x. So another way of writing a fraction, on the updated versions of your TI calculators, if you press alpha and then your y equals, because that's the F1, that's function 1, it gives us a new menu. The n over d, that's your numerator over your denominator. I can press enter on that one, and it gives me an actual numerator and denominator, so it looks like a fraction. So I can put the 1, and then I can put the 4 in the denominator. And now I want to, again, store this number for x. So now every time I press x, it'll just give me 1/4. So instead of retyping this expression, I can actually go and copy paste. So I'm going to go up until I get to my expression. I'm going to press enter on this expression. And now, because it's underneath my last storing of the x, this will store the 1/4 in for the x. So if I press enter, I should get a whole new different answer from that. But is it 28? It is not 28, so 1/4 is not the correct answer. So again, this is helpful for if your expressions are very long and complicated to where you don't want to have to rewrite everything over and over again. And if your answers have multiple fractions and you have multiple variables and having to remember to type in the fraction over and over again, so it helps to store things. So now I want to store the number 4. So again, I press 4 because I have to store 4 in for x. So I press 4, then the store button, then the x, because now 4 is going in for the x. So when I press enter, now every time I press the letter x, I'm really putting in the number 4. So again, I'm going to go copy and paste my expression. So there's the 4 store x, the last answer, and then my original expression. So I'm going to press enter on this, and it copies and pastes it. And now I'm going to press enter. It gave me a different answer, but it's still not 28, so I know that 4 is not the correct answer. The answer should be 5, so let's check that. So we're going to do 5. We're going to store that in for x. Press enter. Now my x is 5. I'm going to go grab my expression, 2 to the x minus 4, copy it, paste it, and press enter. And it gives me 28. So my answer is in fact D, because all I had to do was check my answer choices in my original expression to see if it equals 28. Again, this is useful. The store function is useful if you have very long and complicated expressions with multiple variables. Even if it's the same letter, if it's written multiple times, having to write out 1/5 in there multiple different times can be tedious, and then having to copy and paste it being able to copy and paste it so you don't have to retype everything can save you a lot of time. So again, to store something, you press the number, so 9, and then you press the store button, and then you press your variable x, because that's saying 9 is going in for x. That is how x can be written as every time I press x. So if I say x minus 2, that's really 9 minus 2, it gives me 7. So storing it in for the x is pressing the number, then your store button, then the x button. So it must be 9 arrow x in order for your x to represent a value. This does not affect the y equals button. So I stored 9 in for x. So if I type in x in here, it will only graph the line of x. It will not graph the line of 9. So if I press graph, it is still graphing a regular x versus if it had said 9, because that's what I stored it for earlier, these are not the same graphs. So your graph, your y equals, is not affected by anything you stored in here. So my x, because I graphed it, has now been changed. As soon as I went to a graph, it now changes and it's not stored as the same number. Your x value is always stored as a 10 if you haven't cleared it. So that's why you're not supposed to use the x in the home screen unless you specifically store a value in for it. So that is the store function key so you can utilize to check answers and plug them in.